Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session. Today, we do want to cover tags and how to use them and how to reuse them on different transfers. So, our agenda for today would be first, we want to define tags. Maybe some of you already know what tags are, but just to have some, fresh information about it. Then the second part would be about where you can use tags. You have different places where you can use them. So again, if you already know this information, that's okay. But I think this is useful also for users that haven't used tags that much. Then I will show you in MyRapidi how tags look like, how you use them on transfers, and then how you run the transfer with that. Any questions you might have, you can add them, while I'm speaking, and then I will be able to cover those. And then we have the upcoming sessions. I will show you what's next and resources. So general resources and the one specific for this session. So let's define a bit tags. So then we provide this information to everyone. So tags are reusable placeholders. So you use them on your transfers. And then the main purpose is that instead of building a separate transfer for each legal entity, then you just have one transfer, right? And multiple tags set up. So it means that you have this master transfer that will be running for all your companies. So this is a very smart way of transferring data back and forth, right? And then it also reduces the work that you have to do. And of course, also when you set up schedules, you can also use tags to actually set them up, right? Because then you would have a master transfer that would be used to run, let's say, the data sync for 5 different legal entities. And then when you set up your schedule, you can also set it up based on the tags that you have. So then you would have 5 different schedules, one for each company. And then they would all use the same transfer. So it's like a very straightforward way of getting the data correctly into any of your systems. Now, as I said, you'll have one set of transfers, you have many companies. So you'll have just one, let's say you want to sync, customer information or maybe invoices or orders, then you just create one set of transfers. So anything that you want to have in there, and then you will be using that for many companies. So if you have one company, if you have 5 or 20, you can still use the same transfer. So that's definitely, really organized, and it gives you the possibility to actually keep everything into the same place. Then no duplication. So for example, you need to make changes to that master transfer that you are using for all your companies. You just made those changes there, and then those would apply globally, so to speak. So this means that you don't need to do anything else afterwards. Think about a situation when you have 5 different legal entities and you would have 5 different transfers, right? So in that case, you have to take each transfer one by one and modify whatever you need to modify and then save them. When you have tags enabled, then you just change, the setup, or maybe you adjust it on that master transfer, and then you're done. Then that would apply to all your companies. And then another important aspect is easy onboarding. So if you set up your integration for, let's say, 3 different legal entities, right? Then you need to add the 4th one, right? So then you can simply include that, right, into your own setup, because you already have tags defined for the other companies. You define tags for the new one as well. And then that one will run as part of the master transfer. So it's really easy to onboard any new companies because you already have the setup in place that allows you to do that. If you were to not use tags and say, I want this to be done individually, of course, you will need to set everything up every time, but not with tags. So here, you would just add it, and then everything would run in a matter of minutes. So less work for you and anyone from the company. And then you have full control at runtime. So then when you have tags defined, then everything will run based on what you have defined there, the connection that you have added for that specific company. So everything is under control, and then the data will be synced correctly. Now, of course, when we talk about tags, we also want to talk about the tag values, right? Because within tags, you have the values that you define in there. And then that would be a complete set of values for one company. So you would have one row per company. So if you have 5 companies, and you would just go and add more and more. So it's more like the company profile, so to speak, within MyRapidi, where you would see exactly everything that's being used on that specific integration. So we explained tags. Now let's briefly look at the second part. This one is about where tags are being used. So you can add tags in many different places. So on the transfer itself, in the transfer description, you can add a specific tag so that you run that transfer for multiple companies. You can add it on the source, you can add it on the destination. And this is very helpful because sometimes you have on the source, let's say you have your ERP, and there you have an instance for every single company. On the destination, you might have a CRM, and there you have just one instance for all of them, right? So this is something really useful because you can use tags on any of them so that data is retrieved from the right company. And then, of course, you can use link storages within tags, right? Because you can also have that set up on your specific transfer. So, for example, if you want to save all the, let's say, the record IDs, right, within MyRapidi in a link storage, you can have those created and then link them to that company's tag, right? So it's like you have, then you will have, each company would have specific link storages with specific values. Then again, with schedules. With schedules, you can use tags because then you will be able to run the same transfer for multiple companies. So if you have more than one, then you will use just one master transfer, and then via the tags, you will set up the separate schedule. So then when you run them, they will read from that specific company. So that way, everything is synced correctly back and forth. So you have many different places where you can use tags, of course. So it's just a matter of making sure that everything is configured correctly, because later on, then it will be very easy for you to maintain this setup and also to onboard any new companies that you might have. Now, let's see. Next, I will go to MyRapidi here. Okay, so first, let's take a look at tags, right? So that it makes sense what we are trying to explain here. So first and foremost, before you add anything on your transfers, you do have to make sure that you set up your tags, right? So this is a place where you have tags. So when I expand this part here, the company tags, so you will see here a list. You'll see the code, description, right? And here you can have a connection prefix if you want to. It's not mandatory, but you do need to have a code and a description. So everything that you see here under code, these are actually the headers from here, right? From the tag values. So imagine that you have like a table, and you first you have to define the headers, right? And then below the headers, you would add the values that that specific header needs to point to. So for example, here we have this specific code that I have defined. So it's, let's say, stands for company. So I have this connection, which is BC connection, right? And then I have this company. So this connection will belong to this company. Then the second connection will belong to this company. And then you'll see a row for every single company that you onboard. And then based on what you add here, right, then you can go in and add values under this list. Second, for example, we have currency. So currency, you can set up a default currency, right, for your, for your companies. And that's something that can be used on your transfers so that you send that value if you need to. And then what you see as part of tags, you would see the link storages. So everything that has ls in front, this actually points to a link storage, right? So then it makes sense and say, okay, this would be a header, would be ls invoice, which would be a link storage for invoices. And then below, I'm going to point this to the link storage name that I have already created. And then, of course, the same thing applies to any type of data. So let's say you have customers, would be ls_cust. So this is a link storage meant to hold the customer record IDs, right? And then I have created two different link storages, one for each. So I have one for this company and then one for the second company, right? So then you will have unique link storage names, right, for each of them. And then when you are running the transfer, then Rapidi will point to those specific link storages that you have set up. And then you can add more to it if you want to, right? So that's that. And then here, if you need to add anything, you just click on new. Here you add what you need to add. So if this is linked to a link storage because you do want to use that, you just write ls and then the type of data. It can be invoice, order, and anything. If it's just, let's say you want to store default values, for example, like I did for currency, you can also do that. Or anything that you want to add, it can be added here. You just put it a code, a description, and then you save it. And then, for example, if we were to say, let's add ls opportunities, for example, we can say Salesforce opportunities, and then I'm going to save it. Okay, so then if we look here below, then I have this, added automatically to my list. So this means that now I have this header, and of course now I can go ahead and edit the tag values and point this to a specific link storage. So anything you add in here will be automatically added here as part of the headers, and then you can edit any of them. So if you click on edit, you can just add here and say opportunity. That would be the name of the link storage, and then you can click on show, and then that will be, I think it should be, yeah. So that would save the tag values for you. Of course, if you don't need some of them, you can simply remove them, and then they will disappear from the tag values as well. Now, let's take a look at a transfer so you can see how this looks. Okay, so for example, here we have a transfer. And here we have added this tag within the transfer description. So this actually points to the company that I have set up. And, and as you have seen, I had two companies set up, right? So then when this transfer runs, I want this to pick the, a specific company. And then when you use tags like this, then it will always require tags in order to run. And then here on the destination, I have used tags again, because what happens is that I have my source, which is Salesforce, and here I have one instance for all companies, and then destination where I have multiple instances, right? Because each company has its own instance. So then I need to send this to the right ERP, right? So then as destination, I'm using a tag. And then if we look at the link storage here, again, this is a tag. So this one will be updated accordingly when the transfer runs. So for example, if I'm running the transfer for the first entity, which was the Danish one, then Rapidi will update the customer link storage that belongs to the Danish entity. If I run it for the Spanish entity, right, then Rapidi will update the other link storage, the one that belongs to the Spanish entity. So this is the placeholder that needs to be set up so that data is updated correctly, right? And then you would see the right information for each of your companies. Now, if I were to say, okay, I have tags defined and I want to run this transfer. So if you want to run it without selecting a tag, right, then you would get errors, right? It would say that this could not be found. And that's because you have all these tags here defined, and then Rapidi is expecting you to select one of them. So for example, here, on top, you have your tags defined. So when you have them set up and you have a row for each of those companies, then you would see the list here as well. So then what happens is that you have to select a company when you're manually running the transfer so that data is sent correctly. So then if we were to select this one, and then if I run it, then it should try to run and send data to the other system, right? So in this case, my transfer ran, and as you can see here, it updated the link storage that belonged to the Danish entity, right? Because I ran this transfer for the first entity, which is a Danish one. So, so then it's really important to make sure that you set up the right tag values for each company, because if you do so, then everything will be updated correctly on your end. And then here we have, I wanted to show one example. Like I mentioned, the default values, right? So apart from using tags, as part of the transfer like general section, you can also use tags within the mapping, right? So in this case, you can say, okay, I want to set up the default currency, right? If there's no value, right, in the source system. So you can use the specific tag here, and then when this transfer runs, it will actually check the value that you have set up as part of your tag values. So let's say that the currency for this record is empty. So it's empty, so this means that Rapidi will check the tag values for the Danish entity, and it will pick the currency that you have set up, and it will send that to the destination. So that's a way to actually send data to the other system as well if you need to. You can also set up default users if you want to. If, for example, sometimes you want to add the salesperson, right, on a specific, let's say, account. And sometimes it needs to be defaulted to a specific user. Then you can also do that as part of tags. You go to tags, you set up the tag values, and then you add that specific user that it needs to default to. So that's, again, another possibility that you have, so that you avoid errors, for example, right? Those situations where that specific field is empty in the source. And then another important thing that tags can be also used in filtering, right? So like in this case, I'm sending data from Salesforce to Business Central. So here is just one-to-many, basically, right? So there are situations when you want to send specific data for specific companies. So the easiest way is to have a legal entity field in the source, and that would be populated with what you actually have as part of your tags. So if you say, okay, I have this account that needs to be synchronized to BC, but I want to send it only to the Danish entity, then you would have the legal entity field populated with the Danish entity name. And then when this transfer runs, it will pick up that account and send it to the right BC instance. So this is a way to actually keep everything on track and sending data only where it needs to be sent, right? Because sometimes you don't want to send everything to all, companies in your ERP. So when you need to separate them, then you can use this type of field, and then Rapidi will be able to see which is the legal entity that you have selected, and then route the data to the right one, to the right ERP instance. So that's, again, something that you can use. Let me see. And of course, if you do not want to use tags, then you do have to remove tags from the general section, right? Like you see it here, because if you just want to run it as it is without tags, you would get that error, as you have seen before. And then it will not allow you to send anything. I think this is an error that customers have seen quite a lot, and they were actually unaware of the fact that there are tags defined here, and they need to use them in order to run the transfer. So if you want to go the simple way, like one-to-one relationship, remove all tags, and then the source destination has to point to a specific connection, and then you would be able to run it without tags. Now, I wanted to show you here when it comes to schedules, because this is also connected to tags. Now, when you set up a schedule, right, you have two different companies, and you do want to have two schedules, right, that are running based on the same transfer. So here, I go to tags and I would select one of them. I'll go to my group, right? You can either select a transfer or a group. I will just pick this one. And then I want this to run every day, and I'll put it to run, let's say, starting tomorrow. Now I'm going to save it so we can see how it looks. So if we go to active here, so this is how the schedule name looks like. So it will show, okay, this is a group, right? We have the customer. This is the connection. It identified the connection. And then it also identified the company name. So every time you create a schedule using tags, you would see this specific, I would say, naming convention, right? So because then if you go to the other one and you create it, and let's say we'll use this one as well, customers, and we want to run it tomorrow, and we save it, and we'll just take a look at how it shows up here. So as you can see, it created two schedules, and each one of them, each one of them is using the master transfer. And then here you would see the company name at the end. So this will tell you, okay, this is the schedule running for this company. And then the second one is running on the second connection, which is for the second ERP company that I have. So it's pretty straightforward and easy to understand. So then if you have more companies, you just continue the process, and then you add more and more. And then you can get to the point where you have 5 companies running, and then they would be using the same transfers. So then you would have just a set of transfers, or just one transfer that would feed into multiple schedules. So I think that's something that's really interesting, and it's really easy to follow it, because then you will know for sure, okay, this is the Spanish one, this is the Danish one. So it's not difficult to actually find the schedule that's actually running. So I think that's for the for this part. Let me go back to this one. If you have any questions, then you can also use the chat. But of course, if you need anything else afterwards, or you think about something and you need to ask us, then you can reach out separately. So then we have, when it comes to the sessions, the next one would be about AI in MyRapidi. So that's an overview. This one will be a very interesting session. We'll go through that, and then I will explain a bit more, how it works and how you can use it, because it's definitely beneficial. And then this is the full schedule. So the next one is the one that I mentioned, the overview. Then we have, we have another one that's specific on Albert, our AI agent. So how you can use Albert, in order to actually troubleshoot or do some work on your integration. And then I think the last one from the series would be about the MCP server. So you can register for any of them, and then we'll go through that. Of course, any questions, anything about any topic, you can also reach out separately. And yes, write some feedback. If you have any, you can definitely use this form. If you have ideas, you can also use this form and write them down, so that we can take a look, and maybe we can prepare different content or cover different topics, anything that's important to you. And here we have the general resources. So as you know, we have our wiki, our documentation here. I always say this, so if you're using it and you feel like you're not finding certain things, just reach out, and then we can definitely make sure that the information is up to date. And then support, if you need to reach out to support for any issues, do that. And we have the product updates. You can always subscribe if you want to. I mean, I would recommend you to do that, of course, because then you would get a lot of content into your inbox, and then you learn more about Rapidi and the things that we are working on. And then the product release notes, which are, again, I think important, because you get to know what we have released, and then of course what's included in that release, any fixes, any new functionalities, any new systems that we support, so everything. So those are really good. And yeah, take a look, and if there are any questions, you can always reach out and we can try to help. And then here I added some documentation specific to this session. So we have tags. So this is, I would say, the larger document that explains how tags work and how you can use them. Then we have tags and configuration, how where you can add them, right, and how to work with them. You can definitely take a look at that as well. And then schedules and tags, basically, because that's something that's being used quite often by our customers. So it's good to take a look at that and use them, all right, if necessary. But like I said, you can definitely use tags in so many different places. Go ahead and start small, start using them and see how it goes. But if you run into issues, if something is not clear, like I said, reach out, and then we will be more than happy to help with any questions or concerns. We do try to keep everything up to date or add more documentation. So yeah, so I would say that our wiki is like a living document. So we always add more and more. And yeah, that being said, thank you for watching. I hope that I covered everything. If not, you can always reach out and ask more questions. But I do hope that you will be using tags a lot and optimize your integration, and make sure that you do configure everything correctly on your transfers. Obviously, if you have any like very specific questions or use cases, you can reach out and ask us, and then we can definitely provide the support that you need. Thank you again, and have a great week again. And I will see you, I think, at the end of the month when we have our session about AI. So don't forget to register, and then I will see you there. Bye bye.